To call Jake Paul's recent boxing career as anything other than horrible would be quite the understatement. I mean, this fight with Mike Tyson is gross. I mean, it is vile. It is so disgusting, yet at the same time so unfortunately smart. You see, Mike Tyson has no chance against Jake Paul. I mean, I'm sorry to break it to you if you're still kind of on the fence about this, but Mike Tyson, this is as lopsided of a fight as you can possibly get. But I get it. Mike, he kind of gets your hopes up when he releases these videos of him just ripping the pads, looking young and fast and strong. It kind of makes you start to believe, can Mike Tyson actually pull this off? I mean, it's Mike Tyson after all. And, I will say, Mike is very fortunate that we are in the year 2024 where he can take testosterone, he can take growth hormone, he can take supplements that kind of give his body some youth. Which is great, right? He's going to need that if he's going to do this fight. But the unfortunate thing about this fight is, if you go back and look at the Roy Jones fight, Mike looked just as dangerous on the pads then as he does now. And I will applaud him. His punching speed does look impressive for his age, but the thing you can't really get back, the thing that's tough to compensate for, is just the movement. You go back and look at prime Mike Tyson. His head movement was a serious problem. He was so fast, he would explode into range, he was difficult to land shots on. I mean, he was just very, very elusive because of his speed and power, but that's just not there anymore. Yes, he can explode on the pads in short bursts, but you look back at his last fight, and his movement, it just wasn't there. It's not the same as it used to be because he's a 57-year-old man. Just look at how he's entering into range here. He's asking to get cleaned. I'm just being honest. But as I alluded to before, what's so unfortunate and smart about this matchup is people who aren't in the know about fighting, who are just seeing the headlines, they hear Mike Tyson, the Mike Tyson is fighting Jake Paul? Wow, well, Mike Tyson should kill him. It's Mike Tyson. That's what the general public believes, and that is why this fight has the potential to sell well. But with this all being said, there is one thing I want to make very clear here, and that is Jake Paul is not a very good boxer for boxing standards. He just isn't. The only reason why he's good is because, for one, he has completely dedicated his life to becoming a full-time boxer. He has all the funds, all the resources to hire the best team, the best nutritionists, the best recovery, and the best performance-enhancing drugs. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is a 100% certain probability that, in my personal opinion, Jake Paul is on steroids. But, of course, as many of my longtime fans know, I love steroids. I am genuinely all in on performance-enhancing drugs. I think they're great, and I think all combat athletes should use them, and the only reason they're not is because there is a stigma in the public from years and years and years of misinformation. The only reason I'm bringing them up about Jake Paul is just to give context about why he has had success against older, out-of-their-prime MMA fighters. Because the thing about Jake Paul is, he has very good boxing fundamentals. I mean, he's nowhere even close to the level of a real professional boxer, but he never overextends on shots, he sets up punches well, and he has an insane amount of punching power because of the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And the reason we know this, it's pretty simple. Punching power is very similar to sprinting speed. You ask any of the best sprinting coaches in the world, and they'll tell you the same thing. I can't make you fast, but I can make you faster. Whether or not you're very fast or whether or not you can hit really, really hard, that's all based on genetics. Now, you can make incremental improvements, but at the end of the day, you either have it or you don't. You look at Conor McGregor's first ever MMA fight. He had said himself he had only been training a week during this fight. And clearly, the technique's not really there, but the power certainly is. I mean, he was born with it. Just like how Usain Bolt, even if no one taught him any sprinting technique at all, would be faster than 99.99999% of the population. But you look at Jake Paul and you look at his first ever boxing fight, which was against Deji, who he was way bigger than, way more athletic, and yes, they're wearing headgear. But clearly, Jake Paul has no power. I mean, there's absolutely zero power here. Deji, who is clearly outweighed by a lot, never seemed bothered by a punch. And you can clearly see that Jake is in decent shape. He has a semi-muscular, lean build. But like I said, of course Jake can make incremental improvements to his punching power. He can learn how to sit down on the punches a bit more. He can do some more explosive training. And he can definitely work to make his punches more powerful. But you fast forward 2 years and 8 months exactly, and he is flooring Ben Askren with a single shot. This is the same guy that got picked up by Robbie Lawler, slammed on his head, and then ate a bunch of clean ground and pound shots before getting up, taking Robbie down, and then, in my opinion, choking Robbie out because Robbie's arm slid off Askren's head and then bounced on the ground. I mean, this is just simply and plainly unnatural. I mean, if Jake Paul was always capable of this kind of power naturally, you would have seen it in his fight against Deji, but there was absolutely zero sign of it. And my point with all of this is, what makes Jake Paul a good boxer against older, retired MMA fighters is the fact that he has good fundamentals and he has thunderous knockout power. It is just that simple. But we have received some very, very interesting news, and that is that Jake Paul will be fighting Mike Perry on July 20th. Mike Perry is a bit different than some of the other MMA fighters Jake has been fighting. For one, the big difference is, he's in his prime. Anderson Silva was 47 years old. That's another fight that's kind of gross that it happened. Nate Diaz, way past his prime. Askren, Woodley, way past their primes. But Mike Perry, in his prime, and he is the current Bare Knuckle FC champion. So he has actually dedicated himself to the sport of boxing, sort of, just with bare knuckle. But does he stand a chance against Jake Paul? Honestly, I would not say he's the favorite by any means. Not even close. What this pretty much comes down to is the fact that the attributes you need to be successful in a sport like bare knuckle boxing aren't the same as regular boxing. See, in bare knuckle boxing, you have to have this just complete disregard for your well-being. Every single time somebody lands a punch on you, it's just going to rip your face open. And every time you land a punch on somebody else, it's going to really hurt your hand. And Mike Perry is so unbelievably good at just absorbing damage and just going at you, plodding forward and hurting guys really badly. Because most people, they just cannot hang in there in a sport this brutal. But just looking at Mike Perry's pure boxing fundamentals, the head movement, it's really not there. Now, as far as him using feints and footwork to really set up shots, he kind of just goes at you. And like I said, in a sport like bare knuckle boxing, this works because your bare hand is such a dangerous weapon. And without those big gloves, you can't just cover up and block shots the same way. So when Perry is absorbing all the damage you're throwing at him and is just marching forward, winging bombs, it is a serious, serious problem. But put the gloves on Mike Perry, and now we are doing a very, very different sport, one that Mike's attributes just aren't really attuned for. And you got Jake Paul, who, like I said, is not a very, very high-level boxer, but he is better than Mike Perry. He has better defense, better footwork. He just is, this is the sport that he's been doing the last 7-8 years. Mike Perry hasn't. And, on top of all that, he's taller, he's longer, and unfortunately, Jake Paul's reign of terror is not over yet. We unfortunately have to watch him knock out Mike Tyson, which I'm not looking forward to doing. I'm really not.